The dropship burned as it fell, a streak of fire slicing through the alien sky. Inside, Phantom's squad braced for impact, gripping the harnesses of their crashed seats. Warning lights flickered, and the metal walls groaned under the strain. Captain Jack Pierce felt the jolt through his bones as their craft slammed into the ground, kicking up a storm of dust and shattered rock. His ears rang, but he was alive. That was a start. Sound off. Pierce barked. A chorus of voices answered. Sergeant Alex Grit McMillan, gruff and calm. Lieutenant Marcus Sparky Ruiz, already scanning his busted equipment. Corporal Evan Carter, sharp-eyed and steady despite the chaos. Private Tom Doc Holloway, pulling himself free of the wreckage with a medic's instinct to check the wounded. No casualties. Lucky. The cockpit was a mess of twisted metal, their pilot nowhere in sight, probably vaporized on impact. Outside, Crixia stretched in eerie silence. A dead planet in the middle of an alien war, where the only living things were soldiers too stubborn to die. And now them? Comms are fried, Ruiz muttered, yanking at the exposed wiring in his helmet. No way to call for evac. Figures, Pierce said. He looked up, scanning the jagged horizon. No time to mourn the mission gone sideways. They were stranded, deep in hostile territory, and it wouldn't be long before someone came looking. Carter had already climbed onto the wreckage, raising his rifle to scan the distance. Movement. Fast movers, 2 clicks out. Pierce followed his line of sight. Shadows flitted through the haze, silhouettes against the dying sun. Too quick for local scavengers. Too organized for the shattered remains of the native resistance. Araksh, McMillan said, adjusting his scope. Coming in hard. Pierce cursed under his breath. The Araksh were hunters, elite alien warriors bred for precision kills. The kind that didn't leave survivors. They weren't here for salvage. They were here for bodies. The squad moved fast, peeling away from the wreckage into the rocks. Grit took position on the high ground, rifle settling into place with practiced ease. Carter rigged a motion detector from a piece of their shattered comms array, planting it in the dirt. Ruiz scavenged ammo and power packs, tossing them to Doc, who distributed them with cold efficiency. Then they waited. The Araksh came in a silent wave, their bodies sleek and armored, their weapons almost humming with suppressed power. No wasted motion, no unnecessary sound. They were trained killers. Didn't matter. Grit exhaled slowly and took the shot. The alien scout at the front of the pack dropped without a sound, a perfect hole drilled between its 4 forward-set eyes. The others froze. Confusion. Grit fired again. Another kill. The squad erupted into action, unleashing disciplined bursts of fire, targeting weak points, making every shot count. The Araksh weren't used to being outmatched. They hesitated, faltered. Grit downed their squad leader, hitting him mid-stride as he tried to rally the troops. The aliens reeled, unprepared for a human sniper who could kill at a distance they considered impossible. Then they fell back, retreating. Their perfect formation shattered. Pierce didn't let them go easy. He signaled Carter and Ruiz, who flanked wide, cutting off stragglers. Doc took down a wounded one with a precise burst. Then silence. Pierce scanned the battlefield. Bodies lay cooling in the dust. His squad was unharmed. A clean victory. They weren't out of danger, not by a long shot, but they had just sent a message. Humans weren't prey. A sound from the rocks made them snap their weapons up. A figure stood there, half hidden by the jagged terrain. Smaller than the Araksh, armor lightweight, unarmed. Not a soldier. Pierce signaled caution. Come out. Slow. The figure stepped forward. A girl alien but not Araksh. Her features were sharp, angular, with violet-hued skin, and eyes that burned with something between awe and fear. She wasn't running. Wasn't fighting. Ruiz frowned. She was watching the fight. Grit lowered his rifle just slightly, but his voice stayed flat. She saw the shot. The girl took another step closer, eyes locked onto McMillan. When she finally spoke, her voice was edged with disbelief. Impossible. Ruiz worked fast, stripping the fallen Araksh of anything useful. Power cells, comm units, weapons, anything that could be repurposed. The bodies were still warm. He ignored that. Phantom Squad had no luxury for hesitation. Pierce watched their new observer from the corner of his eye. The girl hadn't moved much since she whispered that single word. Impossible. She had seen Macmillan's shot, seen her own kind crumble under human firepower, and it had shaken her. That was good. Fear could be useful. Carter knelt beside one of the Iraq's weapons, turning it over in his hands. The rifle was sleek, dark, pulsing with internal power. No triggers, he muttered. Looks like some kind of neural interface. Maybe coded to their biosignatures. Can you crack it? Pierce asked. Ruiz scoffed. I can try, but I don't have a four-eyed brain. He held up a detached power cell, eyes scanning the design. Might be able to rig this into our gear, though. Give us an edge. Pierce nodded. An edge was exactly what they needed. The girl finally spoke, her voice careful, testing the weight of her own words. You are different. Pierce turned to face her fully. We get that a lot. She studied them, cautious but fascinated. Humans should not be this effective. The Iraqs do not fear other species. They are the most advanced warriors in this sector. Her eyes flicked to Macmillan. Your shot. That distance through armor, even our best marksman cannot make that kill. Gritz sat against a rock, cleaning his rifle with slow, methodical movements. If her words affected him, he didn't show it. Guess your best ain't good enough. She frowned. How? Training. Instinct. Experience, Gritz said. You fight with tech. We fight with skill. Her gaze lingered on him, unreadable. Then she turned to Pierce. I am Aska. I was assigned to study your kind. I expected less. Appreciate the compliment. Pierce looked past her, scanning the horizon. But we don't have time for a Q&A. The Iraqs know we're here. They'll regroup. We need to move. Ruiz finished his adjustments, tossing a modified energy cell to Carter. We got about 10 minutes before they send a real force. I say we find cover. They moved quickly, ghosting through the ruins of a long-dead city. Crumbling stone structures rose like jagged teeth, wind howling through hollow corridors. It had once been home to something, but those days were gone. Now it was just another battlefield. They found shelter in a collapsed structure, half buried under shifting dunes. Carter set up a perimeter while Doc checked their supplies. They were low on everything. Ammunition, food, medical gear. If they didn't find a way to resupply, survival would be a short-lived victory. Pierce crouched beside Ruiz, who was already dismantling one of the stolen alien rifles. Talk to me. Ruiz exhaled, shaking his head. This tech is advanced, but it's got weak spots. Looks like they use biosignature locks, but I might be able to bypass them. Give me time. Time's not something we have, Pierce said. I know. Ruiz tapped the power cell. But this I can use now. He glanced at Macmillan. Might be able to rig your rifle with one of these. Supercharge your shots. Macmillan looked up, raising an eyebrow. I put alien junk in my rifle, and it blows up in my face. I'm putting you down first. Ruiz smirked. Noted. Aska watched them, arms crossed. You do not fight like the Iraqs. They rely on superior technology. You improvise. Pierce met her gaze. That's why we win. She hesitated. You will not win. Silence settled over the squad. Pierce's jaw tightened. Explain. The Iraqs do not fight in isolation. You killed a scout team. That was expected. Now they will send a hunting pack. They will track you. They will adapt. You cannot outmatch them in numbers. Pierce already knew that. The squad's last engagement had been a skirmish. The real fight was coming. Carter returned from his perimeter check. She's not wrong. We've got movement. Large force moving fast. How fast? 5 minutes, maybe less. Ruiz swore under his breath. Not enough time. Pierce looked at his team. Then we make do. Macmillan stood, sliding a fresh round into his rifle. Give me a vantage point. I'll thin their numbers. No, Pierce said. We need to hit them harder than that. He turned to Ruiz. How much power does that modified cell hold? Ruiz frowned. Enough to overload something big. Good. Pierce turned to Aska. You know this terrain. She nodded. Then help us set a trap. Her hesitation was brief. Then she moved, pointing toward a narrow passageway between crumbling towers. There. Force them through that gap. If you have explosives, place them at the base of those structures. When they pass through. Ruiz grinned. We drop a building on M. They worked fast. Ruiz set the charges, rigging them to the salvage power cells. Carter laid down false tracks to lead the enemy toward the kill zone. Macmillan found a high perch, sighting in. The ground trembled. Pierce crouched beside Macmillan. Make every shot count. Macmillan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Then the Iraqs were there. Shadows spilling through the ruins, weapons gleaming in the dim light. Faster than humans, stronger, moving in perfect coordination. Macmillan fired. An Iraq dropped mid-stride, skull punctured. Another fell before they registered what was happening. Then chaos erupted. The squad opened fire, cutting down the first wave. The aliens pushed forward, relentless. Pierce watched the collapse zone. Not yet. The Iraqs pressed closer. 50 meters. 40. Ruiz tensed. Come on. 30 meters. Now. Ruiz detonated the charges. The explosion shattered the ruins, sending tons of stone and metal crashing down. The aliens had no time to react. Dust choked the air, screams lost in the chaos. Then silence. Aska stared at the devastation wide-eyed. You brought the structure down on them. Ruiz exhaled, grinning. Yeah, we do that. Pierce scanned the wreckage. No movement, no reinforcements. For now. Macmillan slung his rifle over his shoulder. Told you, we fight with skill. Aska met his gaze, something unreadable in her expression. No, you fight like something else entirely. Pierce turned away, already planning their next move. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The ruins still smoldered as Phantom Squad moved, keeping low and fast through the wreckage. Dust hung thick in the air, swirling in the eerie silence left by the collapse. They had bought time, but not victory. The Iraqs were relentless. Survivors would report back. The next wave would come. Stronger. Smarter. Pierce led the way, guiding them through the jagged remains of the fallen city. His instincts screamed that they were being watched. The hunter had become the hunted, and every moment spent standing still brought the enemy closer. Ruiz kept checking his jury-rigged equipment, his expression dark. Power cells spent. No more big booms. Carter kept his rifle tight to his shoulder, scanning ahead. That means we fight the next one clean. Macmillan huffed. We always fight clean. Aska followed in silence, her gaze sharp, unreadable. She had seen how humans fought, how they thought, but something still gnawed at her. Finally she spoke. They will not fall for the same tactics. Pierce didn't look at her. We know. She hesitated, then pressed on. If you know, why do you not surrender? Your situation is untenable. Macmillan chuckled, adjusting his rifle strap. Lady, that word ain't in our vocabulary. She exhaled sharply, as if trying to understand something too alien for her to grasp. You cannot win a prolonged fight against them. Their forces are limitless compared to yours. Ruiz snorted. Nothing's limitless. Carter cut in, voice low. She's got a point, though. We can't just keep shooting our way through. We need a way off this rock. Pierce stopped at the base of a crumbling archway, scanning the horizon. Beyond the ruins, the land fell into deep canyons, jagged ravines stretching for miles. If there was a way out, it was through that maze of stone and shadow. Then he saw it. A glint of metal, half buried under layers of dust and debris. Old but intact. A ship. Bingo, Ruiz breathed. They moved quickly, pushing aside broken stone and rusted wreckage. The vessel was alien, but not a Raksh. Something older. The hull was battered, but the main body was intact. More importantly, the power core was still sealed. Carter rapped his knuckles against the plating. Think it'll fly. Ruiz crouched near the engine port, running a hand over the surface. Depends on how much juice is left in the reactor. Aska stepped closer, inspecting the craft with narrowed eyes. This is not an Iraqsh vessel. Is Kasari. Pierce turned to her. That means something. She looked at him, hesitation flickering across her face. The Kasari were once a formidable race. They resisted the Araksh. They lost. Ruiz grunted. So, not the best track record. They were brilliant engineers, she continued, ignoring his sarcasm. This ship may still function. But if the Araksh detect a power signature, they will converge on us immediately. Pierce looked at the others. We don't have another option. Ruiz, see if you can wake it up. The engineer got to work, prying open a side panel and exposing ancient circuitry. Sparks jumped as he spliced wires together, muttering under his breath. The seconds stretched, tension growing thick. Then a low hum. Lights flickered inside the cockpit. The ship was breathing again. Ruiz grinned. We got power. Then the ship's console flickered, and an automated voice crackled to life in a language none of them recognized. Aska stepped forward, pressing her palm against a scanner. The ship hesitated, then responded with a chime. Text shifted into something readable. Partial fuel reserves detected, she translated. Weapons systems offline. Navigation unstable. She looked up. It can fly, but not far. Pierce nodded. Far enough. A distant howl split the air. Macmillan was already moving, rifle up. They know. Carter cursed. How much time? Aska's fingers danced across the controls. Minutes. Ruiz yanked open a weapons locker inside the ship, finding a set of Kasari sidearms. Sleek, long-barreled, alien designs, but still recognizable. He tossed one to Carter, another to Macmillan. Gonna have to make these count. Pierce stepped outside, staring down the canyon pass. Shadows moved in the distance. Dozens of them. More than before. The hunting pack had come, and they were bringing numbers. The ship wasn't ready yet. They had to hold. Pierce turned to his team. We buy time. No mistakes. Macmillan set up at the ramp, lining up his first shot. You know me. Carter and Ruiz took cover behind the wreckage, weapons ready. Doc checked their flanks, watching for a second wave. Then the Araksh came. They moved like ghosts, fast and precise. Plasma fire ripped through the air as they opened up, forcing the squad to hunker down. Macmillan picked them off one by one, each shot landing true, but for every alien that fell, more took its place. The ground shook as an Araksh warrior leapt onto the wreckage, blade flashing. Ruiz ducked, barely avoiding the strike, then fired point-blank. The energy bolt slammed into the alien's chest, dropping it instantly. Carter took a hit to the shoulder, gritting his teeth through the pain as he returned fire. They're pushing hard. Inside the ship, Aska's hands flew over the controls. Almost there. Macmillan took down another Araksh, then cursed. They're flanking left. Pierce turned, spotting a second group, trying to sweep around. He moved before he could think, knife flashing as he met the first one head-on. The alien was fast, but not fast enough. Pierce drove the blade through its neck, twisting hard. The body collapsed. Then the ship roared. Engines flared to life, kicking up a storm of dust and debris. The Araksh hesitated, their perfect coordination thrown into disarray. Get in. Pierce ordered. Carter and Ruiz pulled back first, covering each other. Doc dragged Macmillan up the ramp. Pierce turned for one last shot, dropping an Araksh that had nearly reached them. Then he was inside, slamming the hatch. Aska. She hit the controls. The ship lurched, groaning as it fought against years of decay. Then it lifted, metal screaming, as it tore free of the rubble. Through the viewport, the Araksh swarmed below, their dark forms shrinking as the ship climbed higher, breaking through the dust-choked sky. Pierce exhaled, muscles aching from the fight. They weren't safe yet, but they were moving. Aska turned from the console, looking at him. For the first time, she seemed uncertain. You were not supposed to escape. Pierce met her gaze. You still think this is impossible? She didn't answer. The ship rattled as it punched through the upper atmosphere, ancient systems straining under the sudden demand. Warning lights flickered across the console, flashing in alien glyphs. Ruiz muttered a curse under his breath, gripping the side of the cockpit as turbulence slammed through the hull. "We're holding together," he called, "but don't ask me for much more." Pierce kept his eyes on the viewport. The sky had gone from rust-colored dust storms to the vast, empty black of space. Below, the ruined world shrank into insignificance. They had done the impossible, escaped. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. Aska's fingers danced over the controls, feeding ancient data into the ship's failing systems. "The RH will not let you go." Pierce nodded. He hadn't expected otherwise. Carter, still gripping his wounded shoulder, leaned against the bulkhead. "Tell me we got enough fuel to jump." Aska's expression darkened. "No." Ruiz exhaled sharply. "You want to say that again?" The Kesari did not build this ship for long-distance travel. It has sublight engines, but its FTL drive is non-functional. Pierce clenched his jaw. They had come this far, fought through everything, only to hit a dead end in open space. Macmillan slumped against the wall, rubbing at a fresh bruise on his jaw. "Figures. So what's the plan, boss?" Before Pierce could answer, an alarm blared. Aska swore, in her own language. A RH warship inbound. Through the viewport, the darkness of space split apart, revealing a massive silhouette. The RH vessel was sleek, predatory, built for the kind of warfare that left no survivors. It was already closing the distance. Ruiz groaned. "We just can't catch a damn break." Pierce pushed forward, gripping the back of Aska's chair. "Weapons." She shook her head. "Offline." "Engines." "Maxed out. We cannot outrun them." Carter let his head fall back against the bulkhead. "So what? We die in open space instead of dirt." Macmillan tapped his rifle. Could be worse ways to go. Ruiz wasn't listening. He was staring at the flickering controls, scanning the Kesari script. His eyes narrowed. "Wait. What's this?" Aska glanced at him. "A data core. Kesari archives. What does it matter?" Ruiz was already moving, fingers flying over the interface. "Because the Kesari didn't just build ships. They built weapons. And if I'm reading this right," he trailed off, his grin slow and wicked. Pierce leaned in. "Talk to me." Ruiz gestured to the ancient system, excitement creeping into his voice. The Kesari had a last resort option. Their ships weren't designed to win against the RH in a fight, but they were designed to deny them victory. Aska's eyes widened. "You mean?" Ruiz nodded. "Self-destruct, but not just a normal boom. This thing's got a core overload sequence that could turn us into a sun." Silence hung in the cabin. Carter exhaled. "You want to drop a miniature supernova on M?" "More like force feed, M the worst case of indigestion they've ever had." Macmillan grinned. "Now you're speaking my language." Pierce straightened, already calculating. "How close do we need to be?" Ruiz winced. "Pretty damn close." Aska turned back to the controls. "I can take us there." Pierce met her gaze. "You sure?" She hesitated, then nodded. "You have already done the impossible. I will see it through." The RH warship loomed closer, its weapons charging. The Kesari vessel was nothing more than a relic, barely holding itself together. But in that moment, it wasn't about firepower. It was about intent. Ruiz initiated the sequence, fingers dancing over the interface. "We got 60 seconds before we turn into a star." Pierce turned to his team. "Then let's move." They scrambled for the escape pod, a rusted sphere barely big enough to fit them all. Pierce sealed the hatch just as the ship's internal systems screamed warnings of imminent detonation. Aska launched the pod. The force of acceleration slammed them into their seats. The viewport filled with the growing bulk of the RH warship. Its weapons lit up, preparing to fire. Then the Kesari ship detonated. A blinding explosion tore through the void, swallowing everything in its wake. The RH warship didn't have time to react. It was their one moment, and then it was gone, erased in the violent pulse of energy. The escape pod tumbled, buffeted by the shockwave. Systems flickered, stabilizers barely holding. Then silence. Space stretched endless before them. Ruiz let out a breathless laugh. "Holy hell." Macmillan smirked. "I'm calling that a win." Pierce stared at the empty void where the warship had been. They had done it. The impossible. Again. Aska watched him, something unreadable in her expression. Finally she spoke. I do not understand you. Pierce looked at her. Join the club. She shook her head. The Arach believe themselves superior. They are stronger, faster, more advanced. By all logic they should win. But they don't, Macmillan said. No, she admitted. Because of you. Pierce exhaled, leaning back. We don't fight to prove we're better. We fight because we refuse to lose. Aska studied them, then turned away, lost in thought. Ruiz checked the pod's navigation. We got a beacon. Someone's gonna pick us up. Carter sighed. Let's hope they're friendly. Macmillan chuckled. And if they're not? Pierce smirked. Then we do what we always do. No one needed to say it. They all knew. They'd survive.